Under the quiet hum of commerce and the buzz of everyday life, something is shifting, not with a bang, not with a breaking news headline, but with silence, strategic, intentional silence. Imagine browsing Amazon late at night, casually searching for your favorite products, and then you notice something different. A number. A small, seemingly insignificant number next to the price. But that number isn't random. It's the cost of a decision made far from your screen, inside the Oval Office. A number that tells you how much more you're paying because of a war you never voted for. A trade war. And it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about power, control, and who pays the price when global giants clash. This is the story of how Amazon, a titan of American e-commerce, did the unthinkable, and why that quiet decision might change the global economy forever. So, before we go further, hit that subscribe button and like this video, because what you're about to hear is not being talked about on cable news. This is the other side of the Amazon story, and it starts with one phone call, a call between Donald Trump and Jeff Bezos. Sources say the president wasn't just annoyed, he was livid, furious over Amazon's plan to display, for the public to see, exactly how much Trump's new tariffs were adding to the price of each product. This wasn't just a tech update, it was a political bombshell, a digital middle finger aimed directly at the White House. And within hours, the backlash began. Press conferences, accusations, even whispers that Amazon was becoming an ally of foreign powers, that it had partnered with Chinese propaganda arms, that it was undermining the American economy from the inside. But is that true? Or is this a sign of something far more disturbing? Let's rewind. April 2025. President Trump rolls out a sweeping tariff plan unlike anything the U.S. has seen in the modern era, a 10% blanket tax on all imports, and then an absolutely staggering 145% tariff on goods coming from China, electronics, apparel, toys, tools, all of it, nearly doubled in price overnight. The message? Bring jobs back to America, rebuild domestic manufacturing, punish China. But what really happened? Amazon, a company that handles nearly half of all online shopping in the U.S., was faced with a terrifying decision. Either swallow the costs and bleed money, or shift its entire global infrastructure. What came next shocked the industry. In less than 60 days, Amazon quietly began dismantling over $13 billion worth of existing supply contracts. Ports in California fell silent. Workers at major distribution hubs saw hours slashed, and factories from Shenzhen to Seattle felt the tremor. But Amazon wasn't panicking, it was pivoting, fast. Shipments that once passed through the ports of Los Angeles began rerouting through Tijuana, Monterrey, Hanoi, Mumbai. Overnight, new logistics hubs appeared in Mexico and India. Construction surged, warehouses multiplied, investment poured in. Amazon wasn't just avoiding tariffs, it was redrawing the map of global trade. And the U.S., it was no longer the center. You see, Amazon's pivot wasn't unique. It was just the beginning. Reports from Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal confirmed that other retail giants, Walmart, Target, even Home Depot, are now following suit, cutting ties with U.S.-centric trade channels, rewriting logistics plans, outsourcing operations at breakneck speed. And, as they do, the American consumer is being left behind. Prices are rising, jobs are vanishing, and that little number next to your Amazon cart? It's the price of policy. The tariffs were designed to punish China, but in practice, they're punishing us. Reuters estimates the cost of importing electronics has risen by more than 25% due to the new tariffs. Companies can't keep absorbing the hit, and that's why Amazon made its next shocking move: transparency. By showing how much Trump's policies are adding to every product, Amazon isn't just informing the public, it's waging war. A PR war. One that threatens to embarrass the administration and force a national conversation about the cost of America first. But some say it's more than that. Some suggest Amazon has crossed a line. that it's using its platform to shape political outcomes. Is that a corporate power grab, or the last defense against runaway policy? Either way, the consequences are already rippling through the economy. The ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles are hemorrhaging cargo volume, down 22% in the last year alone. For every 10% drop in container traffic, 5,000 jobs are at risk. And in 2025, that meant more than 11,000 layoffs. Families displaced, communities disrupted. Local diners, truck stops, and gas stations that once thrived on port business are shuttering. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, export growth hit 18%. India's logistics sector is booming. Mexico is emerging as the new gatekeeper of Amazon's U.S. trade flow. Let that sink in. Amazon, the backbone of American retail, is now relying on foreign soil to move goods into the country. And yet, the White House continues to double down. Treasury officials argue that the tariffs will eventually pressure foreign competitors to lower prices, open their markets, and concede power. But will they? Or is this just the beginning of a long, slow unraveling of America's dominance? Because while Amazon adapts, the rest of the country is struggling to keep up. Consumers face rising costs, electronics, toys, clothing, all up by 10–20%. Inflation is no longer an abstract number on a chart. It's the empty space in your cart, the missing items on your shelf, the awkward silence at the cash register. And it doesn't stop with Amazon. Walmart has reported a 12% rise in consumer good costs. Target is facing delays on household items. Home Depot warns of entire tool lines disappearing. Mattel says Barbie production is threatened. And as prices rise, consumer spending falls. A 10% drop in discretionary spending could mean 500,000 lost jobs by mid-2026. The National Retail Federation is already bracing for impact. Families on tight budgets are skipping groceries, stretching every paycheck, and giving up holidays. The middle class is shrinking, and all of it, every missed meal, every canceled vacation, can be traced back to a number in a White House memo. So why did Amazon choose now to speak out? Why risk the wrath of the most powerful man in the world by making tariffs visible to the public? Maybe it's strategy, maybe it's survival, or maybe, just maybe, it's a signal, a warning, that the old way of doing business is over, that the U.S. is no longer a safe or stable hub for global trade, that the world is moving on and America is being left behind. But this isn't just about trade routes and shipping containers. It's about power, influence, identity. What does it mean when the most American of companies begins to decouple from the American economy? If you're still watching, now's the time to subscribe and like this video, because we are far from done. What you've heard so far is just the surface. The implications of this story go deeper, and the ending hasn't been written yet. What happens when the docks fall quiet, but factories rise in another country? When logistics hubs in India boom while California crumbles? When Amazon no longer needs American ports to survive? That's the world we're stepping into. Quietly, one canceled contract at a time, one diverted shipment, one number next to a price. So, next time you check out on Amazon and see that little number, ask yourself, what else are we not seeing yet? What other pillars of the American economy are already cracking, just waiting for the moment we finally hear them break? And so, the silence spreads, not just across the docks of California, but through the corridors of corporate boardrooms, political war rooms, and the quiet suburbs where families now count their groceries in half portions. Behind every product missing from your shelf is a decision, a hesitation, a broken link in a chain that once seemed unbreakable. That chain is the global supply network, and now one of its most critical links, the United States, is beginning to rust. What if the Amazon tariff display isn't just a statement, but a trigger? A first domino in a collapse that could unravel decades of economic supremacy? Because this isn't just Amazon reacting to tariffs. It's the beginning of a larger exodus. Quiet, legal, but deeply symbolic, and maybe irreversible. Think about what this means for the flow of power in the world. For decades, America has held its grip on global trade routes through three pillars: ports, dollars, and tech platforms. But with Amazon slowly shifting its lifeblood operations abroad, the cracks in that model are now visible to anyone paying attention. And if Amazon, a company built entirely on optimizing logistics, no longer believes U.S. ports are worth the cost, what message does that send to every other international firm? Could this spark a chain reaction, one in which Alibaba, Samsung, and even American companies like FedEx and Apple begin questioning their dependency on American entry points? Are we looking at a future where Made in America no longer means value, but vulnerability? And it's not just business, it's national security. When the most vital consumer platforms begin rerouting their entire infrastructure away from home soil, the risks grow exponentially. What happens when supply chains are interrupted not by market conditions but by geopolitics? When a shipment of critical medical supplies gets delayed, not because of weather, but because a new border policy was enacted 8,000 miles away? When entire product categories vanish because manufacturing is too entangled with political hostilities in far-off regions? Amazon isn't just reducing costs, it's rewriting strategic dependency. If America loses its grip on the companies that feed its economy, can it really claim to lead the world? You might wonder, why now? Why is Amazon moving so fast? Why pull out so aggressively from its U.S.-centric supply chain? Could it be something deeper than tariffs? Could internal assessments at Amazon have revealed vulnerabilities we haven't even begun to understand? Maybe it's not just about avoiding costs, but about preparing for the next stage of global rebalancing. Because behind every supply chain shift is a forecast, an assumption about the future. And the picture that's forming quietly behind Amazon's boardroom doors may be far bleaker than what we're being told. Are we witnessing a company hedging against not just a trade war, but the slow decline of American economic predictability? And as that shift accelerates, so do the consequences at home. Already, regional governments in California and Texas are facing revenue shortfalls. Ports that once generated billions in trade taxes are seeing double-digit declines. School budgets are quietly being trimmed. Infrastructure projects are being shelved. Pension promises delayed. And all of it ties back to fewer shipments, fewer jobs, fewer taxable dollars flowing through the old trade arteries of America. What happens when those arteries harden? What happens when cities like Long Beach and Oakland become hollowed-out relics of a trade empire that no longer flows through them? And here's the darker thought. What if this isn't a temporary shift? What if Amazon's move is permanent? The new warehouses in Mexico aren't tents, they're concrete. The logistics networks being laid across Vietnam and India aren't band-aids, they're arteries. What does it say that in just months, Amazon has built more fulfillment capacity abroad than it has in 5 years on U.S. soil? This is not a workaround. It's a migration of capital, of production, of faith in American infrastructure. And if other companies follow, will Washington respond? Or will it simply watch as the world reorganizes without it? Meanwhile, consumers are waking up to a new reality. The price tags don't lie. Where a laptop used to cost $999, now it's $199, with a small note beneath it, $146 due to tariffs. That note isn't just information, it's indictment. It's a daily reminder of policy failure, a spark that could turn economic frustration into political upheaval. Already, polling data shows rising discontent among swing state voters over cost of living issues. Is the Amazon price label the final straw? Could it be that this tiny number, buried beneath checkout buttons and delivery dates, becomes the flashpoint of a national reckoning? If you're still watching, hit subscribe and give this video a like, because this story isn't going away. In fact, it's just starting to heat up. The next chapters may involve retaliations, investigations, even regulations. Will the administration try to silence companies like Amazon? Will lawmakers seek to restrict what private firms can display about public policy? The collision course between politics and commerce is accelerating, and somewhere in that chaos, the future of the American economy is being rewritten line by line. And while all this unfolds, the international landscape is watching. Quietly, strategically. Governments in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the EU are already competing to offer the next wave of trade incentives, tax breaks, infrastructure packages, labor deals, all designed with one goal: to pull the economic center of gravity away from Washington. What happens if they succeed? What happens if the future of global e-commerce no longer passes through Silicon Valley or New York, but through Guadalajara, Bangalore, or Hanoi? The consequences could be massive. The dollar's role as the primary trading currency might face new pressure. The Federal Reserve's control over inflation could weaken as more goods bypass U.S. regulatory frameworks. Financial markets, once tightly coupled to American consumer confidence, may begin to decouple, moving in new, less predictable directions. Could this shift even affect the balance of global debt, capital flow, and investment patterns? Could we be on the edge of a new era in which America's biggest brands wear the flag, but operate offshore? And yet, most people won't see it. Not yet. They'll feel it, sure, at the checkout line, in the missing packages, the delayed deliveries. But they won't connect the dots. They won't see that the silence on the docks is more than just a slowdown. It's a warning siren. And unless someone rings the bell, loudly and clearly, this transformation will continue under cover of darkness. So tell us what you think in the comments. Do you believe this is the beginning of America's economic decline, or just another chapter in a long, evolving trade war? What do you see happening next? Could tariffs be reversed? Could companies be pressured to return? Or is the toothpaste already out of the tube? And then, without headlines, without press conferences, and without a single vote cast, America begins to vanish from its own economy, not in a single moment, but in thousands of small, invisible retreats. The numbers that once pulsed through American trade ports, through its warehouses, through its small towns and big cities, are now shifting to new coordinates. Not New York, not Houston, not San Francisco, but Guadalajara, Chennai, Hanoi. In the span of months, these places have stopped being foreign competitors and have become the new nodes of Amazon's empire. And if Amazon no longer centers its power in America, what remains of the promise that the digital economy would always be made in the USA? In boardrooms across the globe, the ripple effects are setting off a quiet frenzy, not just among tech companies, but manufacturers, logistics providers, even financial institutions. They see what's coming. They see a world where America's tariffs don't just push companies away. They train them to live without America altogether, to operate in ecosystems where U.S. policy can no longer reach, to build supply chains that function independently of Washington's politics. And once those systems are built, why would they ever come back? Who rewinds the clock after the rewiring of global infrastructure is complete? It's no longer just about tariffs, it's about trust. And trust, once broken, does not return with the stroke of a pen. Amazon's global pivot has exposed a deeper fracture between corporate necessity and national identity. For decades, American companies wore patriotism as branding, proudly built in a nation that offered them roads, markets, and stability. But now, as those companies face rising costs, political unpredictability, and consumer backlash, the calculation is changing. Can a company stay loyal to a country that no longer guarantees economic logic? This is the uncomfortable question now looming over Silicon Valley and Wall Street alike. Amazon may be the first to make this pivot so publicly, but it won't be the last. Already, insiders report that other digital titans are quietly preparing contingency routes, alternative ports, foreign tax shelters, investment shifts, and it's not just the giants. Mid-sized retailers, wholesalers, and D2C brands are beginning to follow the same breadcrumb trail out of the U.S. market. Some are doing it quietly, others are just waiting for the moment they can no longer absorb the costs of doing business under a tariff regime that feels more like economic trench warfare than a trade policy. And what about the American worker? The promise of these tariffs, the justification repeated again and again, was that they would bring jobs back. that factories would reopen, that supply lines would return to Ohio, to Michigan, to Pennsylvania. But where are they? Where are the new jobs? Where are the headlines proclaiming a manufacturing revival? Because what we see instead is layoffs at the ports, empty warehouses in Nevada, and broken contracts in Kentucky. Even in places that should be thriving under protectionist logic, factories sit half-built or underutilized. The costs are up, the optimism is down, and the promised renaissance remains a mirage in the desert of political talking points. If anything, the only real boom has been abroad. Vietnam's GDP is surging. India's industrial output is climbing. Mexico's cross-border trade is at record highs, and those gains aren't coming from thin air. They're coming from us, from a redirection of capital that once nourished American cities, but now flows through foreign pipelines. Cities like Houston, Los Angeles, and Savannah, once defined by their trade muscle, are losing their edge. The ports that powered America's retail dominance are growing quieter, not louder, and the jobs that were supposed to return are instead being posted in other time zones, in other currencies, in other languages. So what happens next? What happens if this becomes the new normal? Will the government respond with even more aggressive policies? Will they try to rein Amazon back in? Or will they find themselves powerless, watching from the sidelines as global commerce continues to evolve without them? Some say we're witnessing the emergence of a post-national corporate order, one where companies operate beyond borders, beyond loyalty, driven only by cost, efficiency, and insulation from political volatility. If that's true, then the story of Amazon and the tariffs is not just a trade dispute. It's the early chapter of a new era, one where countries must compete not just for business, but for relevance. And let's not forget the political cost. Voters were told these tariffs would punish foreign powers, but instead they're punishing domestic wallets. Grocery bills are climbing, school supplies cost more, gas stations are quietly raising prices, and consumer confidence, the lifeblood of the American economy, is beginning to bleed. Could this become a defining issue in the next election cycle? Could rising costs become the wedge that fractures political coalitions? Could economic disillusionment fuel a wave of anti-incumbent anger across the country? The writing is on the wall, and companies like Amazon are reading it faster than most politicians. There's also the shadow of retaliation. As America hardens its trade posture, other nations are responding in kind. Chinese regulators are slowing down customs clearances for American goods. EU partners are reviewing import rules. New bilateral trade agreements are forming between emerging economies, none of them involving the U.S. The very architecture of global trade is shifting. And while America once built the blueprint, it now finds itself watching from the margins. Could this erosion of influence be reversed? Perhaps, but not without a level of coordination, humility, and long-term vision that seems increasingly rare in today's political climate. All of this raises a final, sobering question. What happens when the biggest economic power in the world no longer feels like the center of the world's economy? When the symbols of American dominance, companies like Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, are no longer tethered to the soil that birthed them? When the ships that once lined our ports now anchor in foreign harbors, it's not just about losing trade volume. It's about losing leverage, soft power, identity. Can a country lead if its most powerful engines no longer depend on it? And maybe, just maybe, this was never about bringing jobs back. Maybe it was about buying time, delaying an inevitable reshuffling of global power, long enough to pretend it wasn't happening. But now the clock is out, and the reshuffling isn't coming. It's here. So if you've watched this far, do one thing. Subscribe, like, and, most importantly, comment. What do you think America should do now? Should the tariffs stay? Should Amazon be pressured to return home? Or is this simply the new age of commerce, decentralized, unpatriotic, and ruthlessly efficient? We want to hear from you, because the decisions being made now will shape the next decade. And the battle for economic dominance isn't happening in the headlines. It's happening in your checkout cart, in your job prospects, in your future. One click at a time, one shipment at a time, one number next to the price.